Forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads. Prefer a dunk. And expect nothing but the best. This was the Big Ten. Now this is Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Deace.
Welcome to the season premiere of Bigger Ten. I'm Steve Deace here in the Michigan Man Cave with my co-host, who will remain never my partner. He is there in our studios, the one and only Aaron McIntire. Aaron is now post July 4th. We got the insert in the mailer that Bath and Body Works is already putting out the fall smells and scents. I'm ready.
You're ready
essentially,
for
summer ends for me.
Ready for some good endocrine disruptors and Bath and Body Works candles and scents. You'll be sterile.
Ends.
You'll be sterile before the end of the season. We are very crunchy over at the McIntire. Yeah, yeah, you're probably done. We're very crunchy over at the McIntire household. So Bath and Body Works is kind of the devil to us.
But we're ready to. I'm ready for fall, man. There's going to be an NFL preseason game here at the end of this month. Big 12 media days are this week. SEC is next week. Big 10 the week after. So, I mean, we're ready to go. And I think we should maybe lead off the season by getting caught up on some of the biggest storylines of the offseason. You ready to go?
Let's go.
All right, let's talk. Let's take topic number one. And I don't know that I have changed my mind on anything in the sports world more in the last few months than I have topic number one. When I first heard of the concept of automatic qualifiers for the college football playoff, I had that Clint Eastwood Gran Torino look. I mean, I was about to go Hank Hill. Oh, monkey daddy, the backside of your ass. I mean, what? This is the most mangina crap participation trophy I've ever heard. And of course, our league has to be behind it. So now we're sterile by being in this league, okay? And then I started thinking about it. And the more I've thought about it, Aaron, I'm a 180 on this. I actually think this is the best and fairest way to actually have a playoff, because we still don't have one.
Yep.
You've heard me complain all these years. It's not a playoff. It's an invitational. There's no guaranteed way to get in. Well, we finally did guarantees. If you win your conference, you're in a power league with the expansion to 12. So to me, and I thought the way Petiti explained this to Joel Klatt, when we now go into these conferences and there's all these unbalanced schedules, everybody's 10-2, everybody's 9-3. You haven't played each other. You don't have nearly as many data points as you do in college basketball. There's not all these these non-conference festivals where all the top teams in college basketball are playing each other all November and December. We don't have that in college football. So with imbalanced schedules, no commissioner, we don't even have every league playing the same amount of games. What is the fairest way to do this? Just to settle it on the field, actually. And to just now, what could be argued is how many automatic bids each league should get. But if you look at the averages, frankly, Petiti's offer of giving the ACC and the Big 12 two apiece is actually more than they have averaged in the last 15 years slightly. The Big 10, by only taking 4, is slightly under its average. That is if we applied a rule of 16 to the seasons 16, of the previous years. Yeah. So the more and more I thought about this, I thought, you know what? I'm actually going to admit I'm wrong on this. This is the fairest way to do it, to settle it on the field. We'll have more meaningful games. You'll have a situation now where, a Minnesota-Nebraska game, that's a key game now, right? One team's walking out of there, and that's a game in Minneapolis later this year, and you're keeping these teams alive at least until early November when the changeover to the basketball starts, rather than, hey, had our third loss in October, we're out, tap out, and there's nobody coming to games and nobody cares. And then I love the idea of these sorts of round robins on conference championship weekend, and you got to secure your spot. I mean, I think this actually puts more emphasis on the regular season than what we had before. You play your way in. I started listening to other podcasts of people who were opposed to this, and frankly, I found all their arguments bad. So I'm all in on this. I think this is absolutely the best way to do it. And I did not contemplate I'd ever say that when I first heard this proposal.
Well, I'm more in favor of it, not because I think this is necessarily a good, but the other alternative is so bad. As long as we have a network aligned with like basically the college football playoff shows, as long as we have that same network aligned with one of the two prominent conferences, I just don't trust, and I don't think most of our listeners and viewers, if they are aligned and following Big Ten teams, I don't think they trust that process to be completely unbiased. And there's no process involving humans that's completely unbiased. I get that. But here's the ideal scenario. What if we had like a machine, a computer that could run advanced analytics, put all of those analytics together and come out with an unbiased result? Oh, wait, so that's what we had with the BCS, and that's what we got rid of. So we tried that. We tried the selectors. The third option here is just automatic qualifiers. And from what I've heard, I'm not sure if this is what Petiti spelled out. Essentially, that would mean this wouldn't necessarily devalue championship weekend. Whoever's playing in the conference championship, correct, would be vying for a better seed, and that better seed could make or break your playoff run if there is one to be had. If you don't make your conference championship game, but you are headed to the playoffs, there's no way you're going to be seeded better than those who made their conference championships across the board. That's how I've heard it explained before. So just because this is not necessarily objectively good, I mean, I just think it's better than the alternative. And I just think no matter how much you expand the playoff, you're going to have questions. You're going to have people who are belly aching afterwards, just like we do with the NCAA men's basketball tournament. You're going to have people belly aching, so you might as well just put automatic qualifiers in there. I think what this is addressing is kind of the elephant in the room, which is we're not all equal. Not all conferences are created equal. The Big 12 is going to be a really fun conference again this season. They did away with the the preseason media poll before Big 12 media days because last year's was so bad. But because it was so bad, that's just kind of an indication of how entertaining that conference is. That conference top to bottom can't hold a candle to the Big 10 or the SEC most years. And so I think what this is addressing is, let's just admit it, not all conferences are created equal. And I think that's really where it cuts to the quick here with automatic qualifiers. So I'm in favor of it, not because I think it's necessarily going to be better. I can see what you're saying there, where there is more importance later on in the season. Still, though, I think for most teams, like the bottom half of the league, it's still going to be the same old story. But the middle of the pack, yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. That could actually add some drama to the last 5 weeks of the season.
And I'm also in favor of depowering the nonsense of what's called the committee, just depowering it. It can seed the teams. It can choose the last three at-larges if Notre Dame doesn't claim one of those.
That's pretty much my argument in favor of automatic qualifiers. That's the only thing that I'm hanging on.
Yes. Yeah, just to tell them now picking 11 teams, I think that's a terrible idea. All right, let's get to my really contrarian opinion here. I actually think now that college football is paying players and a significant amount of money above the table, as is college basketball. And at some schools, wrestling's doing it. Baseball is doing it in the South, for example. Hockey's doing it at a place like Michigan, for example, or Minnesota. I think now that they're paying guys above the table, I actually think there is a way better chance than your average sports podcaster. And frankly, even your average sports law expert is telling you that the Supreme Court's going to actually save college sports. And if I could take my Bigger Ten hat off and put on what I do full-time for a living, I mean, I cover the Supreme Court as closely and the courts in general, and it's been one of the primary issues I've covered throughout the entire nearly 20 years of my career. It's one of the issues I've covered the closest. And I think there's a broader angle here that maybe even your sports law guy that your favorite podcast is bringing on doesn't understand because he's focused in a particular area of expertise. But I think you have to look at this way more broadly than this. Yes, the Supreme Court did render, Aaron, a 9-0 ruling that opened the door to the NIL in the first place, that the schools could not limit compensation to players when they weren't giving them anything. That's why they got a 9-0 vote. All right? It was that they were limiting their compensation while giving them no compensation from the revenue they were making off of them. That's why it was a 9-0 vote. All right? But now they are. And now it's a significant amount of money. And I think we both know that the 20% it's starting at this year, it's going to go much higher than that as the years go on. And I don't know, I'll be around for it, but you will be around, Aaron, if we last that long as a nation, to see it look like pro sports leagues where it's darn near 50-50. Okay? So since the baseline starter kit here is we're giving them 20% of the television revenue we're generating, now it's not as cut and dry, this situation. And now I think you get into the nuances of the ideologies at play with the 9 justices. And, if you look at this last court session, the last 2 court sessions, we've seen the Supreme Court issue landmark rulings reining in regulatory agencies within the government. Whether you agree or disagree with that, if you agree with it, you call them bureaucracies. If you disagree with it, you think that they're, valuable institutes for democracy. This is not the place to debate their merit, but that's just the ruling itself. That ruling is a fact. It's called the Chevron case. They overruled the Chevron doctrine. This last session, they actually did something we almost never see a Supreme Court do in our lifetime, reined in the jurisdiction of lower courts to stop them from issuing any more universal injunctions, and just saying, hey, one federal judge in Montana can issue a ruling that now applies to every law on this subject in the country. They got rid of that. Does that strike you as a Supreme Court that is then going to turn around and say to college sports, we're going to give you the ruling that would establish maybe the largest, most powerful labor union in America? And it's going to be a labor union of 17 to 23-year-olds. I don't think so. And I think what's happening is many of your sports analysts are, frankly, just too uneducated on the issue to analyze it beyond what's at the end of their fingers and toes. And I think your sports law people, they may know more Latin words than me, but they're only focusing on this within the paradigm of the sports world. And I think now that college football is meeting the initial objection, that college sports are compensating the athletes for the revenue that they are generating, and in a significant amount. I think there may be 5 votes on this court to say, okay, we'll give you another sort of de facto antitrust exemption carve-out like they did 40 years ago, which led to the so-called term of student athlete. I think there's, now, how much more of a chance? Would I bet on it? Maybe, maybe not. But many of your analysts out there, Aaron, are acting like this isn't even a consideration. And I think the odds are way higher than that. I don't believe there are 5 justices for, here's a ruling that will set in place a labor union of 17 to 23-year-olds. I don't believe that. What are your thoughts?
I am more confident that the Supreme Court might have the ability and the will to create a carve-out for antitrust than I am Congress. Now, Congress, I'm at like 1%. SCOTUS, I might be at 10 to 15%. I think Amy Coney Barrett would probably be the rubber here, don't you think? I could see her kind of going both ways. And as you can see on the lower third, I just can't wait for the oral arguments, KBJ and ACB on CFB. That'll be just so much fun. But you are correct. Worldview is destiny, and this is not a nuts and bolts conversation. This is a worldview conversation. Like most things at the Supreme Court, whether or not you like it, are. It's all to do with worldview. And I think Amy Coney Barrett might have loyalties on both sides. Not loyalties, but sympathies, I should say, on both sides of this issue. So I think she would probably be the deciding vote. But in terms of actually saving college football, I'm not sure on its trajectory right now. I'm not sure what could, quote unquote, save. And what does save actually mean? Can we define that? Does that mean that we've
as allowing
reached some level of homeostasis for a long period of time, so that we're not in this turbulent
decade would allow
forever?
The nuts and bolts of House to largely remain intact as a governing system, because the sports crowd and the sports law crowd is acting like this thing's going to be done in 15 minutes. I think they're going to have difficulties with, what's market value and how are you determining that? But saving it would mean they allow this current House settlement's basic structure with maybe some change in nuances, but the basic structure to remain in place so it would not force unionization and collective bargaining. That's what saving it, I think, we'll define it as.
So you're saying some level of homeostasis to where, I mean, this last decade of college sports has been absolutely turbulent and chaotic, and so we need to get away from that. So if that's what saving this means, saving college sports means and saving college football means, then yeah, I could see that happening. I think it'd have to be probably a tailor-made lawsuit that reaches the Supreme Court. But as we're going to talk about in a moment, I'm sure that's coming down the bend very quickly.
All right, speaking of lawsuits, this one made a lot of national news about a month or so ago. The University of Wisconsin is suing the University of Miami, claiming that they basically tampered with one of their star recruits and athletes, and got him into the transfer portal. And there's a breach of contract there, a level of malfeasance there. This would be a landmark case. There's been nothing like this ever before. What's interesting, you may ask, well, I mean, how did they have him under contract? Somehow, Wisconsin signed this young man to a contract with the House settlement's future passage in mind, meaning the language of the contract does speak to the revenue share that will come with the forthcoming House settlement, right? So this wasn't just some kind of basic NIL deal or anything of that nature. It included the future consideration of what is now the framework of college football, which I think maybe gives this a little bit more standing than people may have thought when it first started. Now, the discovery process thing on this, brother, Now, this thing could be a treasure trove for sports podcasts, the discovery process on this, you know? I would imagine there's about a dozen schools that want this to go away and about 85 schools that are wearing Wisconsin underoos under their school colors right now, okay? What are your thoughts?
Yes. I think that's probably a good number. 25 schools, a couple dozen schools who are totally fine with the way things are handled right now. But for the rest of the sport, yeah, you gotta stop this. And it's super annoying too. I don't know about you. I don't really give two rips about recruiting anymore, especially high school recruiting. Even portal recruiting, I don't give a rip about the players on the team until the ref blows his whistle at 11 a.m. on the first full Saturday of college football, because then I know, these are guys probably for at least 8 games this season are going to be the team. So, and it's because I'm serious. I mean, we had guys on Iowa last year, 3 games to go in the season. Peace. It's just that's the era that we live in now. And these guys don't say peace because they don't know where they're going next, by and large, not all the time. It's because they do have a pretty good idea of where they're going. And I say this as somebody who I think Iowa was guilty of tampering or something with Caden McNamara. Wow, what a great trade-off that was a few seasons ago. So this has to end. It has to end soon, especially now that the schools themselves are paying players. This has to meet its end. I don't know. Again, this could be a landmark case. If it reaches a higher court, there's going to have to be some sort of framework structure put into place that actually has real penalties with teeth in it for those who violate tampering. I don't even know if there's an official rule on the book right now that's actually enforceable or has any sort of repercussions for those responsible.
No.
So right now it's totally fine, but I just think it needs to go away for the benefit of the entire sport.
And that's why a lot of schools want this precedent set. I think I skipped the previous lawsuit we're going to discuss, so my bad on that. We're already seeing Title IX lawsuits are being filed as well concerning the House settlement and revenue sharing. I don't think these will go anywhere. Maybe you'll get one, Adam's apple possessing female feminist judge somewhere in some deep blue area who doesn't know what a woman is to give you a ruling. But ultimately, I think these will go nowhere, Aaron. We have been allowing the men's programs that generate revenue to be getting all kinds of facilities, donations from as a nonprofit, receiving an inordinate amount of the donor money. An inordinate amount of the facility upgrades and availabilities, training staff. I don't know why this would be any different. I think the only winners here will be billable hours. I think ultimately these lawsuits just have no merit at all.
No, I mean, I think the latest straw or the latest thing before the era of NIL is football programs could actually nourish their walk-on players now. That's not something that exists in other maybe it exists in other sports programs at schools, but that's kind of a big one. That's a pretty major expense, especially during the actual season. That's just the latest example that popped into my mind about how the men or the male athletics. That's been benefiting from this, and rightfully so. I don't think anybody with a functioning prefrontal cortex would disagree. That's probably how it should go. They're the ones who are earning the most money. They should probably be rewarded the most at the end.
Final thing, let's get to one basketball item of note that caught my eye during the offseason to wrap up the Bigger Five for the first time of the new season of Bigger Ten. How does Rutgers not even sniff a winning record, let alone the NCAA tournament, with 2 top 5 picks in the NBA draft? That has to be an all-time worst coaching job by Steve Pikiell and Rutgers. Has to be. I've never seen anything like that. You have 2 of the top 5 picks in the NBA draft. You can't even have a winning record, let alone make the NCAA tournament. Aaron, what are we doing here?
I don't know, man. It's just basketball is weird. It can be a really weird sport. I agree with the general sentiment that if you have 2 highly rated and highly drafted NBA players on your roster, you should probably do a little bit better than what Rutgers did. That's pretty much common sense. But did they play the entire season?
Dylan Harper was out for like a week or 2. That's about it. And for the most part, they played the season. Yeah. And here's the thing, the positions they play, Dylan Harper's your lead guard, Ace Harper is your stretch 4. You can pick and roll with them. You can put him in the post. Yeah. It's not like they were 2 guys that they couldn't figure out how to share the ball together or something. Like, to me, there's like no excuse for that whatsoever. For a guy that has been a very underrated and solid coach in our league, maybe some guys are just better coaching try-hard dudes because they just connect with them better than recruits of this magnitude. Maybe Steve Pikiell's one of those guys, because at the very least, this last season's the worst job he's ever done.
Yeah, you're kind of talking me into this now, because you never know, but especially when you've got a guard there, that seems like a tailor-made team to make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. That seems like what you would have. That seems like common knowledge. It's just basketball, the personalities, the I don't know, just the nature of the sport, especially at the next level in the NBA where, the players kind of run things, not the other way around. And maybe that's trickling down into college basketball now. But yeah, if you got 2 highly drafted players, there's no excuse for that. I wasn't trying to make excuses for Steve Pikiell. That's just kind of the way that shouldn't be the way things go. But basketball is just an odd sport sometimes. But you shouldn't do as bad as Rutgers did. You just shouldn't.
When we come back, we're going to take a look. It's our annual look on what Phil Steele has to say in his renowned magazine about the upcoming Big Ten football season. Next. All right, Aaron, this is another one of those traditions unlike any other. We do this every single summer on the show. We go through Phil Steele's renowned college football preview, which I am too old to read. I get the hardcover. I give it to you. It's too small. I can't read it anymore, even with glasses. I got to get the digital version so I can zoom in and actually see his hieroglyphics, his scribbling. All right. But there's always a treasure trove of information there. Let's go through it. All right. What Phil has to say, laying it out for the Big Ten football season. All right. Based on what they lost to the NFL draft, Phil says these teams have at least a 72% chance of having the same or worse record than last year. Ohio State, Oregon, and then UCLA and Maryland. That's an odd foursome, but there you go.
Yeah, because UCLA and Maryland were kind of towards the bottom of the pack anyway.
Yes, that's why it's odd. Yeah. Now, here's the thing we say every year. I forgot the disclaimer, Aaron. We do this every year when we do this thread with Phil. You're not so much, other than turnovers equals turnaround, that's kind of a singular outlier. But for the most part, you're trying to see if a school or 2 or 3 shows up consistently on a trend line more than a particular trend. Just that disclaimer out there. All right, let's keep going here. Next. The following Big Ten players are first-team All-Americans. Caleb Downs at Ohio State, Ole Vivega-Ione at Penn State, Nicholas Singleton at Penn State, Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State. 17 other Big Ten players made second, third, or fourth team. Preseason All-American, which tends to happen when you have 18 teams in your league. Big Ten teams in his top 10 unit ratings. He's got Penn State number 4 at quarterback, Penn State number 1 at running back, Oregon 6, Minnesota 9. Wide receiver, Ohio State number 1, Indiana 9, Oregon 10. Offensive line, Penn State number 1, Iowa 8, Oregon 10. Defensive line, Penn State 3, Michigan 5, Iowa 8. Linebacker, Michigan 2, Penn State 6, Ohio State 10. Secondary, Penn State 4, Michigan 9. Special teams, Iowa 1, Michigan 5, Illinois 9. Anything stand out to you about those?
Well, you've got Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State to a degree, and Iowa were the ones that stood out to me, having multiple mentions there. Obviously, Penn State is the darling going into this offseason, and they would be who I picked to win the Big Ten this season as well. But you're seeing Penn State show up a lot on these lists so far, especially that one.
Phil says there's a 75% chance these bull market teams have a better record than last year. Maryland, Michigan, Purdue, and Washington. 87% chance that Indiana has a worse record than last year as one of his bear market teams.
Wait.
Among his
Maryland has, because Maryland and UCLA were the 75% to have a same or worse
lost
record.
too much of the draft.
But they have a 75% chance to have a better record than last year. That's interesting.
Yes. That is interesting. Although Maryland, now, here's the thing. There's 4 teams.
Yes.
So Maryland could be the one that's wrong, and he's still 75%. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So there you go. Big Ten teams among his top 20 toughest schedules. Wisconsin, he has playing the hardest schedule in the country. UCLA, number 8. Purdue at 13. Rutgers at 16. Oregon at 19. USC at 20. His top 6 easiest schedules in the Big Ten, and I made 6 because you can see these teams are all bunched up together, okay? 63 is Nebraska. They're playing the easiest schedule in the league. And then Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Washington, Minnesota are, essentially the same ranking. That's why I went to 5 to 6 on that one. Phil's famous turnovers equals turnaround metric has Purdue as the only Big Ten squad to get a boost here, but he has Indiana, Iowa, and Penn State all due for regression to the mean because of how well they did with turnovers a year ago. Phil has Ohio State atop his Big Ten power ratings, but only a 1-point favorite over Penn State on a neutral. Oregon is next, about 4 points back, with Michigan close behind. Then there's a 3-point drop-off until a cluster of teams are kind of bunched up, so you can kind of see the tiering that he has there. Phil has Illinois, USC, and Nebraska among his top 10 surprise teams. Illinois won 9 games last year and was ranked. How are they a surprise team? They're like in everybody's top 20 preseason. Yeah. That one makes absolutely no sense to me. Okay. These are teams he believes have no shot to be in the AP preseason top 10, but be ranked there at the end of the year. I agree Illinois won't be in the top 10. I agree with him on that. This is how Phil is predicting Big Ten teams to finish in the final top 25. Penn State, number 1. Ohio State, number 5. Oregon, 8. Michigan, 10. So he has those 4 teams going to the college football playoff. Illinois at 16. Indiana at 20. And USC at 22. Does any of that seem crazy or nuts to you?
No. I mean, based on what we saw last year, maybe the biggest stretch, and I don't think it's a big stretch, is USC. But you should expect them to be in the top 25, if not higher than that. But I don't think any of that is nuts. I mean, Michigan, I think people might squabble with Michigan a little bit, but based on their recruiting, based on the fact they have the number 1 quarterback, and he didn't exactly look like a freshman from my understanding during their spring ball, I don't think that's a stretch either.
Phil's predicted Big Ten order of finish. Penn State 1, Ohio State 2, Oregon 3, Michigan 4. As we said, he's got those 4 teams in the playoff. He has Illinois, Indiana, Nebraska, and USC all tied for 5th. Iowa at 9th. Minnesota and Washington tied for 10th. Wisconsin 12th. That would be Luke Fickell is fired. Rutgers at 13th. Michigan State, UCLA tied at 14th. Maryland Northwestern tied at 16th. And Purdue at 18th, coming in last.
Well, it depends on how much more patience the Wisconsin administration has for Luke Fickell. Given that Phil Steele has them with the toughest schedule amongst Big Ten teams, finishing 12th in this league, still not exactly what Wisconsin is going for. But you can see Illinois, the 5 spot there, Illinois, Indiana, Nebraska, USC. If you just do it off the top of your head, they're kind of the same-ish team. Indiana maybe Indiana and USC are more the same. Nebraska and Illinois kind of have parallels as well. But just off the top of my head, in terms of strengths of all those teams, they kind of are the same team. So that's not really surprising that he's got them bunched together. But yeah, as I said, Penn State is my pick to win the league as well.
You know what I think looking at this? I think we just looking at those standings, I think that's a strong argument to just go ahead and have automatic qualifiers and play it on the field.
Chances are most years, 3 out of the 4 are going to be Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, and Michigan. And then the fourth one, there's going to be Nebraska's every now and again, Illinois, every now and again, Iowa, every now and again. USC should be up there as well. Don't forget about them. Should be is different than will be. But yeah, I mean, you can swap out the 4th spot most years, but it's going to be 3 of those 4 most years.
Leave that panel up there for just a second as I make this point. If we're going to say, and then throw USC in most years, that these are the 4 high-profile, the best recruiting programs in our league, in some order, and the order varies every year. Are we okay with that? That those 4, Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, and Michigan,
yep.
Right? Okay. So then this really just comes down to schedule. Michigan doesn't have to play Oregon, doesn't have to play Penn State. Oregon doesn't have to play Ohio State and doesn't have to play Michigan. All right? Penn State doesn't play Michigan and gets Oregon at home and plays at Ohio State on the road. But the rest of its schedule is like a season-long bye. So if we're going to have these kinds of imbalanced schedules, which are unavoidable because of how big these conferences are, and now you're going to tell me that the top 4 recruiting programs in the country in the conference from a resources standpoint, and then USC maybe it's either just outside that tier or about to enter it with the way they're recruiting in this cycle. And they're not going to, on a regular basis, be playing each other. How the hell, Aaron, are we determining this? Because this doesn't just exist in the Big Ten. Outside of the Big 12, all right, where Arizona State can go from worst to first in 1 year, outside of the Big 12, this dynamic exists in every other power conference. That's a pretty strong argument, I think, just kind of going full circle here. Just settle this on the field. How the hell is the committee going to figure that out?
They aren't, and they're going to bias the SEC, I think. That's what we've seen.
Probably.
That's what we've seen over and over again. But, I mean, to your point, I was talking about this with a buddy not too long ago. I think it's highly possible that my team, Iowa, could be a more capable team than they were last year comprehensively and be like 6-6 this year just because of their schedule. That's an indication of what you're talking about there. It does come down to the schedule, and so you need to have some sort of set into place, set in stone rubric by which teams can make the college football playoff because these leagues are so big now. We've gotten rid of divisions that all of that talent, the cream will rise to the top, and sifting through who is actually cream and who's just in the rest of the milk. That's just something that I don't want to leave in the hands of the committee any longer.
I agree. All right, we'll come back, wrap it up here next. All right, this week's X poll results. We asked you, do you agree with the Big Ten about having automatic qualifiers slotted for every conference in a new expanded college football playoff in 2026? 63% said yes. 37% or 38% said no. I wonder if after this show, if that number might go up a little bit more now that you and I kind of explained our positions on this a little bit more. That brings us to our feedback of the week, and it comes from Buckeye Dre. If the SEC goes to 9 conference games, doesn't that greatly improve the strength of schedule metric that they're pushing through? I think that would boost the number of SEC teams in the playoff instead of reduce them. Agreed. Now, we're kind of factoring strength of schedule into the analysis of the rankings already. That's on the card of the committee, strength of record, all that kind of stuff. The reason the SEC is loath to go to 9, Georgia doesn't mind going to 9. Texas doesn't mind going to 9. Alabama doesn't mind going to 9 for the reasons, Dre, that you're articulating. It's the second tier of teams, the Kentuckys, the Vanderbilts, the Mississippi States. They're the ones that are very hesitant. And I don't know what the voter threshold in that league is and if they really just want to ram something through. It's the second, third tier of teams that are struggling to do that are probably not playoff contenders almost ever. And so what do we have to do to get to a bowl game? It's hard enough, and now you want to make us play another SEC game at the exact same time. I really don't think the top of the SEC cares about playing 9 games. I don't. Because of what you just said. I think it's the middle of it that doesn't want to do so, and here we are. You have any thoughts on that before we sign off?
No, that is interesting, but at the same time, I mean, how you have to take into account how actual to Vanderbilts of the world, to the Kentuckys of the world. I mean, are bowl games still very, very valuable to them? Maybe they are. I mean,
that's true.
We saw a great matchup between South Carolina and Illinois. That's one that came off the top of my head. Both of those teams seemed like they were very invested in that bowl game. I think it was Duke's Mayo Bowl or something like that. So how much do these teams... Citrus Bowl, that's right. How much do these teams actually value these bowl games anyways? So what's the difference between 5 and 7 and 6 and 6 to them? I mean, I guess that's the answer to that question. Maybe it is valuable to them. I'm not sure what's on their minds. Maybe it's the extra built-in home game too. Maybe that's a factor. A guaranteed home game.
Great stuff. Good to be back as the 2025 season looms here on Bigger Ten. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, share, 5-star review, comment in the comments section. All those things help the show to grow, find more Big Ten fans just like you. You can follow us on X in between episodes as well, at Bigger Ten on X, at Bigger Ten there. For Aaron McIntire, I'm Steve Deace. We're going to see you next time right here on Bigger Ten.